I found the note taped to our refrigerator on a Tuesday morning in March. Yellow sticky paper with Rachel's handwriting in purple ink. Marcus, I found someone better. Don't look for me. The house key is on the counter. Good luck with everything. 23 years of marriage reduced to 34 words on a Post-it note. But when her phone call came 6 months later, crying about needing bail money, I had already become someone she no longer recognized. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The coffee maker was still brewing when I noticed something different about our kitchen. Rachel's favorite mug was gone from the dish rack. Her vitamins were missing from the counter. The reality hit me slowly, like stepping into quicksand. I walked through our Phoenix house in a daze, checking every room. Her closet was empty except for clothes she'd complained about for years. The jewelry box I'd bought her for our 10th anniversary sat open and hollow on the dresser. My hand shook as I picked up the house key she'd left beside the note. 23 years of shared mornings, shared dreams, shared everything. And she'd walked away like I was nothing more than a roommate whose lease had expired. I called her phone immediately, straight to voicemail. The recording was new, just her voice saying, "Leave a message," without mentioning her name. I stood in our bedroom looking at the half-empty space where her belongings used to be. The indent in her pillow was still there from the night before. Had she been planning this while lying next to me? Had she already been with someone else when she kissed me goodbye yesterday morning? The questions multiplied like cancer cells, spreading through every memory I thought I could trust. Work was impossible that day. I'm a project manager for a construction company, responsible for coordinating teams and deadlines, but I couldn't focus on anything beyond the note in my short pocket. I kept pulling it out, reading those 34 words, hoping they'd somehow change or make more sense. They never did. My supervisor, Dave, noticed my distraction around noon. "Marcus, you've been staring at that blueprint upside down for 20 minutes. Everything okay?" I showed him the note without explanation. Dave whistled low and shook his head. "Man, that's cold. Take the rest of the day off. Hell, take the rest of the week if you need it." I drove home to an empty house that felt like a museum of my own stupidity. Every photo on the mantel showed Rachel smiling beside me at various stages of our life together. Our wedding day at the little chapel in Sedona, vacation pictures from Cancun, Colorado, the Grand Canyon, Christmas mornings with the tree I'd always insisted on getting too early. In every single photo, I looked genuinely happy. She looked like she was performing. The silence was suffocating. For over 2 decades, this house had been filled with Rachel's presence. Her reality shows playing in the living room, her phone conversations with her sister in the kitchen, her complaints about work echoing from the bedroom. Now there was nothing but the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic on Indian School Road. I opened a beer and sat in my recliner, the chair I had bought myself for my 40th birthday because Rachel said the old one was embarrassing when her friends visited. Everything in this house reflected her preferences, her choices, her vision of how we should live. The beige walls she'd insisted would go with everything, the glass coffee table that showed every fingerprint, the decorative pillows that served no purpose except to annoy me every time I tried to sit comfortably on the couch. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother Kevin in Tucson. "Haven't heard from you in a while. How's married life treating you?" I stared at the message for 10 minutes before typing back. "Rachel left me. Found the note this morning." His response came immediately. "What? Are you serious? I'm driving up there right now." Kevin arrived with a bottle of whiskey and the kind of grim expression reserved for funerals. He read the note, cursed creatively for 30 seconds, then sat down across from me with 2 glasses. "Tell me everything," he said, pouring generous amounts of Jameson for both of us. Where could I start? How do you explain 23 years of slowly disappearing? How do you describe the gradual erosion of a man's confidence, one criticism at a time? I began with the obvious things. Rachel's increasing complaints about our lifestyle, her comments about other couples who seemed happier, wealthier, more adventurous, her subtle but constant suggestions that I wasn't ambitious enough, successful enough, interesting enough. Remember when I got that promotion 3 years ago? Senior project manager, 15% raise. Most guys would expect their wives to be proud. Kevin nodded, already knowing where this was headed. Rachel's first comment was about how long it took me to get promoted compared to her friend Jennifer's husband. She said I should have been pushing harder for advancement years ago. The memories came flooding back with alcoholic clarity. Rachel's reaction to every good thing in my life was somehow tinged with disappointment that it hadn't been better. When I surprised her with a weekend trip to San Diego for her birthday, she mentioned how her coworker had gone to Hawaii with her husband. When I finally paid off my student loans, she pointed out that we were starting retirement savings later than we should have. She was never satisfied, I told Kevin, as we worked through the bottle. Nothing I did was ever quite enough. Not the house, not the car, not the vacations, not me. Kevin had met Rachel many times over the years, but I had hidden most of the problems from family. Men don't like to admit their wives constantly point out their inadequacies. By midnight, Kevin was sleeping on the couch, and I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling. Rachel's side of the mattress felt like an accusation. I'd bought this king-size bed because she said our old one was too small, too cheap, too embarrassing when her mother visited. Everything in this house reflected her preferences, her choices, her vision of how we should live. The beige walls she insisted would go with everything. The glass coffee table that showed every fingerprint. The decorative pillows that served no purpose except to annoy me every time I tried to sit comfortably on the couch. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother Kevin in Tucson. "Haven't heard from you in a while. How's married life treating you?" I stared at the message for 10 minutes before typing back. "Rachel left me. Found the note this morning." His response came immediately. "What? Are you serious? I'm driving up there right now."
They'd known us as a couple for 8 years, ever since we'd moved into the neighborhood. Martha had always been polite to Rachel, but I got the impression she'd been holding back opinions. "She always seemed restless," Martha said carefully while clearing the dishes, like she was looking for something that wasn't there. Frank was more direct. "She never looked happy, Marcus, even at neighborhood barbecues, even when things seemed good. Some people just can't be satisfied with what they have." I went home that night feeling slightly less insane. For months, I'd been questioning whether I was imagining Rachel's unhappiness, whether I was being too sensitive about her constant criticisms. Hearing Martha and Frank confirm what I'd been experiencing validated something I'd been afraid to acknowledge. Rachel hadn't been happy for a long time, and nothing I could have done would have changed that. The next few days blurred together in a haze of practical tasks and emotional processing. I canceled the vacation we'd planned for our anniversary in June. I returned the earrings I'd bought for her birthday next month. I changed the locks, not because I was angry, but because the house felt vulnerable with her key floating around somewhere. Every task was a small funeral for the life I'd thought we were building together. My phone never rang. Rachel didn't call to explain, to apologize, to check how I was handling the sudden upheaval of everything we'd shared. The silence was somehow worse than any argument we'd ever had. At least during fights, she acknowledged my existence. This complete absence felt like being erased from her life with industrial efficiency. Work became my refuge. Construction projects have clear objectives, measurable progress, and problems that can actually be solved. I threw myself into coordinating schedules, managing budgets, and dealing with the daily crises that come with building things. My team probably thought I was having some kind of motivational breakthrough. In reality, I was just grateful for 8 hours a day when I had to think about something other than my failed marriage. But evenings were brutal. Coming home to an empty house, eating dinner alone, watching television by myself. I'd never realized how much of my daily routine had been built around Rachel's presence. Making coffee for 2 people, buying groceries for 2 people, planning weekends for 2 people. Now everything felt excessive and pointless. I started eating at different restaurants every night just to avoid the silence of my own kitchen. Denny's, Olive Garden, the little Mexican place on Camelback Road. Sitting alone at tables meant for couples, watching other people share meals and conversations I'd taken for granted for over 2 decades. The waitresses were always kind, but I could see pity in their eyes when they brought me a table for 1. 3 weeks after Rachel left, I found myself at a sports bar on a Friday night, nursing a beer and watching basketball games I didn't care about. The place was full of couples on date nights and groups of friends celebrating the end of the work week. I was the only person sitting alone, the only one who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. A woman at the bar struck up a conversation with me during halftime. She was attractive, probably 10 years younger than me, and seemed genuinely interested in talking. We discussed the game, the weather, our jobs. Normal conversation with another human being felt like discovering water after walking through a desert. When she asked if I wanted to get dinner sometime, I panicked and made an excuse about being busy with work. Driving home that night, I realized I'd become afraid of human connection. Rachel's abandonment had poisoned my confidence so thoroughly that the prospect of trusting another person felt impossible. What if I wasn't interesting enough? What if I wasn't successful enough? What if I spent months or years building something new only to have it destroyed with another note on another Tuesday morning? The house felt even emptier than usual that night. I walked through rooms that still smelled faintly like Rachel's perfume, past furniture we'd chosen together, under light fixtures she'd insisted would brighten up the space. Everything was a reminder of shared decisions that apparently meant nothing to her. I fell asleep on the couch watching late-night television, too tired to face the bedroom where her absence felt most obvious. Saturday morning brought the kind of Arizona sunshine that used to make me grateful to live in Phoenix. Rachel and I had always loved weekend mornings, sleeping in late, drinking coffee on the back patio, planning lazy days around the pool. Now the sunshine felt like mockery, illuminating an empty house and an emptier life. I decided to clean out Rachel's remaining belongings, items she'd left behind, either forgotten or deemed unworthy of her new life. Old books, cheap jewelry, clothes that had gone out of style. Each item was a small archaeological artifact from our marriage. A concert t-shirt from a show we'd attended on our 5th anniversary. A cookbook she'd bought during her brief phase of trying to cook more elaborate meals. Reading glasses she'd purchased in bulk from the drugstore. In the back of her nightstand drawer, I found a journal I'd never seen before. My conscience battled with my curiosity for about 30 seconds before curiosity won. The entries went back 2 years, filled with complaints about our marriage, fantasies about different lives, and increasingly detailed descriptions of a coworker named Derek, who made her feel appreciated in ways I apparently didn't. Derek was everything I wasn't, according to Rachel's private thoughts. Adventurous, ambitious, willing to take risks, unafraid of change. He drove a sports car, lived in a downtown loft, traveled internationally for work. He listened to her dreams instead of focusing on practical concerns like mortgage payments and retirement savings. He made her feel young and exciting instead of settled and boring. The journal entries revealed the timeline of my marriage's destruction. Rachel had been emotionally involved with Derek for over a year before physically leaving me. She'd been comparing us constantly, finding me lacking in every category that mattered to her. While I was working overtime to pay for the home improvement she wanted, she was fantasizing about a completely different life with someone who represented everything I'd never be. Reading her private thoughts felt like performing surgery on myself without anesthesia. Every page contained new evidence of my inadequacy, new confirmation that the woman I loved for 23 years had been slowly building a case against me in her own mind. I'd been on trial without knowing it, and the verdict was inevitable. The phone call I'd been dreading came on a Sunday afternoon in early April. Not from Rachel, but from her sister Linda in Scottsdale. Linda had always been the diplomatic one in Rachel's family, the one who tried to smooth over conflicts and maintain relationships. Her voice was careful and measured when I answered. "Marcus, I wanted to check on you. Rachel told me what happened, and I'm sorry things ended this way." Linda's tone suggested she knew more than she was revealing. "How are you holding up?" I gave her this standard response about taking things one day at a time, focusing on work, staying busy. Linda listened patiently, then asked the question I'd been expecting. "Have you considered counseling? Sometimes these situations can be worked through if both people are willing to try." The suggestion felt absurd. Counseling requires two people who want to solve problems together. Rachel solved her problems by disappearing with someone else. I don't think Rachel is interested in working things through, I told Linda. She made her choice pretty clearly. Linda was quiet for a moment. She's staying with Derek temporarily, but I don't think she's thought this through completely. Sometimes people make impulsive decisions when they're unhappy. The revelation that Linda knew about Derek confirmed what I'd suspected. Rachel's family had been aware of the situation before I was. They'd watched her plan her escape without warning me what was coming. Linda, she didn't leave a forwarding address or a fine number. She withdrew money from our accounts and removed her name from everything we shared. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned. My voice was steadier than I felt. If she wants to work things through, she knows where to find me. After hanging up, I realized that Linda's call had been a fishing expedition. Rachel's family was trying to gauge whether I'd be receptive to reconciliation. The fact that they were asking suggested that maybe Derek wasn't providing the perfect life Rachel had imagined. Maybe reality was setting in about the difference between fantasy and actually building a life with someone new. But I'd already started building something new myself. Not a relationship, but a different version of who I could be without Rachel's constant assessment of my shortcomings. I'd been working out at the gym, partly to fill evening hours, partly because I'd always wanted to get in better shape, but Rachel had complained about the cost of membership. I'd been reading books I actually wanted to read, instead of the self-help titles Rachel had suggested to improve my career prospects. Small changes, but they felt significant. For the first time in years, I was making decisions based on what I wanted, rather than what would make Rachel happy or prevent her from being disappointed. The freedom was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. The answering machine in my kitchen had been blinking for 3 days before I finally pressed play.
I'd been avoiding it, afraid it might be Rachel calling to twist the knife deeper. Instead, it was a message from my company's human resources department about updating my insurance beneficiaries. The reminder hit me like a physical blow. Rachel was still listed as my primary beneficiary on my life insurance policy, my retirement accounts, my emergency contacts at work. Changing those designations felt like finalizing a divorce that hadn't been officially filed yet. Each form required me to acknowledge legally what Rachel had already made clear emotionally. Our marriage was over, and I needed to stop pretending she might change her mind. I updated everything to list Kevin as my primary beneficiary and emergency contact. Strange how quickly 23 years of shared planning could be erased with new paperwork. April melted into May with the relentless heat that makes Phoenix summers legendary. Rachel had always hated the hot weather, complained about it constantly, begged me to consider moving somewhere with more reasonable temperatures. Now I found myself appreciating the brutal sunshine, the cloudless skies, the dry heat that seemed to burn away the humidity of regret and self-doubt. My routine settled into something sustainable. Work during the day, gym 3 evenings a week, dinner out or simple meals at home, television or reading until bedtime. Weekends meant household projects I'd been postponing, visits with Kevin when he drove up from Tucson, occasional dinners with Frank and Martha. Simple, predictable, peaceful. The transformation was gradual but unmistakable. I'd lost weight, gained muscle, started sleeping better. My blood pressure, which had been creeping upward during the final years of my marriage, was back to normal ranges. The stress-related headaches that had become routine were gone. My body was responding positively to the removal of constant emotional tension. Colleagues at work started commenting on the change. Dave mentioned that I seemed more focused, more confident in meetings, more willing to voice opinions instead of deferring to others. I'd started volunteering for challenging projects instead of accepting whatever assignments were given to me. Without Rachel's voice in my head questioning every decision, I was rediscovering the competence and self-assurance that had gotten me promoted in the first place. Memorial Day weekend brought an invitation I hadn't expected. Frank and Martha were hosting a neighborhood barbecue and specifically asked me to join them. "You've been keeping to yourself too much," Martha said when she stopped by with the invitation. "Time to start socializing again." The barbecue was larger than I'd anticipated. Couples and families from up and down our street, some people I recognized but had never really talked to. I felt awkward at first, unsure how to introduce myself. Was I separated? Divorced? Abandoned? The terminology seemed important, but I settled on simply saying Rachel and I were no longer together. To my surprise, several people shared similar experiences. Tom from 3 houses down had been divorced for 5 years and was happily remarried to a woman who actually seemed to enjoy his company. Sandra from across the street had left her husband 2 years ago after realizing she was more content alone than constantly managing his disappointment in their life together. The hardest part is letting go of the story you told yourself about how things were supposed to be, Sandra told me while we watched kids play in Frank's pool. You spend so much energy trying to fix something that was never going to work, you forget there might be other options. Her words stayed with me that night as I sat on my back patio looking at stars that seemed brighter than I remembered. For 23 years, I'd been trying to solve the puzzle of Rachel's unhappiness, convinced that if I could just figure out the right combination of improvements, she'd be satisfied. I'd never considered that her unhappiness might not be about me, might not be fixable by my efforts, might simply be an incompatibility between who she was and who I was. June arrived with temperatures that made working outdoors almost impossible after 10 in the morning. My construction crews started earlier, finished earlier, adapted to the reality of desert summers. I found myself appreciating their practical approach to challenging conditions. No complaints, no wishing things were different, just intelligent adaptation to circumstances beyond their control. The first anniversary gift I'd bought for Rachel was still wrapped in my closet, a silver bracelet with her birthstone, something I'd chosen carefully and hidden successfully for months. I'd planned to give it to her during our anniversary dinner at the restaurant where we'd had our first date. Now it felt like evidence of my own delusion, proof that I'd been planning a celebration for someone who was already planning her exit. I returned the bracelet to the jewelry store on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 3 months after finding her note. The manager remembered me, remembered helping me choose the piece, and handled the return with professional sympathy. The refund went back onto my credit card, money that would help with the mortgage payments I was now managing alone. Walking out of that jewelry store felt like closing a chapter I'd been reluctant to finish. No more anniversary dinners, no more carefully chosen gifts, no more investments in a future that would never arrive. The relief was unexpected and powerful. I was free from the exhausting effort of trying to make someone happy who didn't want to be happy with me. That evening, I cooked dinner for myself instead of grabbing takeout. Nothing elaborate, just grilled chicken and vegetables, but I ate at my kitchen table with actual silverware and a cloth napkin. Small acts of self-respect that I'd neglected during months of emotional survival mode. The food tasted better than anything I'd eaten since Rachel left. My phone rang while I was cleaning dishes. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. The voice on the other end was shaky, tearful, and hauntingly familiar. "Marcus, it's me. I need help." Rachel's voice came through the phone like a ghost from a life I'd finally started to forget. 3 months of silence, 3 months of rebuilding myself from scratch, and now she was crying into my ear like nothing had changed. "Marcus, please don't hang up. I'm in trouble. Real trouble." I stood in my kitchen, holding the phone, staring at the spot where her goodbye note had been taped to the refrigerator, the same refrigerator that now held only my food, my leftovers, my simple meals for one. "What kind of trouble?" "Rachel." My voice was steadier than I felt. "I'm in jail. They arrested me tonight, and I need bail money, and I don't have anyone else to call." The words tumbled out between sobs. "Derek won't help. He said he can't get involved because of his job." "Marcus, I know you hurt me, but please, I'll pay you back. I promise I'll pay you back." Jail. The woman who'd left me for someone better was calling from jail, begging for help from the man she'd abandoned with a sticky note. The irony was so perfect it felt scripted. What were you arrested for? Theft. But it's not what it sounds like. It's complicated. There was a misunderstanding at Derek's office, and somehow my name got involved, and they think I took money from client accounts. Her voice was getting higher, more desperate. I didn't do anything wrong. You know I wouldn't steal. Actually, I didn't know that. 3 months ago, I thought I knew Rachel completely. I thought she was committed to our marriage, happy with our life, planning our future together. Every assumption I'd made about her character had proven wrong. Why should her honesty be any different? How much is the bail? I asked, surprised by my own calm tone. $15,000, but you only have to pay 10% to the bondsman, $1,500. She was speaking quickly now, sensing an opportunity. I know it's a lot, but I'm good for it. Derek has a lawyer, and he says this will all be cleared up in a few days. $1,500. Last month, I'd spent almost that much on a new washer and dryer after our old ones finally died. Purchases I'd made without consulting anyone, without justifying the expense, without hearing complaints about the cost. Money that I'd earned with my own labor, saved from my own paycheck, spent on my own priorities. The freedom had been intoxicating. Where's Derek in all this? I asked. If he has a lawyer, and this happened at his office, why isn't he handling your bail?
Rachel's crying intensified. He said he can't be associated with this right now. His company's doing an internal investigation, and he needs to protect his position. He promised he'd help once everything gets straightened out, but right now he has to keep his distance. The man she'd left me for was abandoning her the moment she became inconvenient. The adventurous, ambitious Derek, who made her feel so appreciated, had vanished the instant she needed actual support. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Rachel, you left me 3 months ago. You took half our savings and disappeared without a forwarding address. You removed yourself from all our shared accounts and responsibilities. Why would you think I'd be willing to help you now? Because you're a good man, she said quietly. Because despite everything, you're the kind of person who helps people when they're in trouble. That's who you've always been. She was trying to manipulate me with my own character, appealing to the same sense of responsibility that had kept me working overtime to pay for her wants, sacrificing my own dreams to fund her vision of our life together. The Marcus she'd left would have already been reaching for his checkbook, but that Marcus had died the day I found her note. I need to think about this, I said. Give me the information about where you're being held and I'll call you back. Marcus, please don't leave me here overnight. This place is horrible, and I'm scared, and I just need to get out, so Derek's lawyer can sort everything out. Her voice was breaking with genuine terror now. I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm begging you. I took down the jail information and hung up without making any promises. The phone felt heavy in my hand, loaded with the weight of a decision that would define who I was becoming. The old Marcus would have driven to the jail immediately, paid the bondsman, and felt guilty about hesitating even briefly. The new Marcus had questions. I called Kevin first. He answered on the second ring, probably expecting good news since I'd been checking in regularly with updates about my improving life. "What's up, brother? You sound weird." I explained the call, Rachel's situation, and her request for bail money. Kevin listened without interrupting, a skill he'd developed during his own divorce 5 years earlier. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Let me get this straight," he finally said. "The woman who left you a note saying she found someone better is now calling from jail asking you to bail her out because the someone better won't help her." Kevin had a way of cutting through emotional complexity to reach brutal clarity. "That's about the size of it. And you're actually considering helping her?" I walked to my back patio and looked out at the pool that was finally clean again. For weeks after Rachel left, I'd let it turn green with algae, too depressed to maintain it properly. Last month, I'd hired a service to restore it, then learned to balance the chemicals myself. The water was crystal clear now, reflecting the Arizona stars. I don't know what I'm considering. Marcus, this isn't about Rachel anymore. This is about whether you're going to let her continue treating you like an emergency contact for problems her new life creates. Kevin's voice was gentle but firm. You spent 3 months rebuilding yourself. Don't throw that away because she's crying. After hanging up with Kevin, I sat by the pool thinking about the man I'd been versus the man I was becoming. 3 months ago, I would have rushed to help Rachel without question, motivated by love, duty, and the fear that refusing might prove her right about my inadequacies. Tonight, I was motivated by something different: curiosity. I wanted to see what would happen if Rachel faced the consequences of her choices without my intervention. I wanted to know if Derek's love was strong enough to survive inconvenience. I wanted to understand what $1,500 meant to me now that I wasn't spending my money to subsidize someone else's happiness. My phone rang again 20 minutes later. Rachel, calling from the jail's payphone with increasing desperation. "Marcus, did you think about it? Can you help me?" I thought about it. The answer is no. The silence stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. When Rachel spoke again, her voice was hollow with disbelief. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, I'm not going to pay your bail. You left me, Rachel. You chose someone else. You removed yourself from my life completely. Your problems are no longer my responsibility." "But I don't have anyone else." The statement hung in the air like an accusation, as if my refusal to be her backup plan was somehow my failure rather than hers. "You have Derek, you have his lawyer. You have the life you chose when you decided I wasn't good enough." My voice remained calm, detached, like I was discussing someone else's situation. "Figure it out the same way you figured out how to leave me." "Marcus, please, I made a mistake. I know that now. Derek isn't who I thought he was, and this whole situation has shown me what really matters. We could try again. We could go to counseling. We could fix things." There it was. The offer I would have begged for 3 months ago. The reconciliation I would have accepted gratefully, despite the humiliation. Now it sounded like another manipulation, an attempt to trade future promises for immediate rescue. Rachel wasn't offering to fix our marriage because she loved me. She was offering to fix it because Derek had abandoned her and she needed someone reliable to clean up her mess. "Rachel, when you left, you didn't just end our marriage. You taught me something important about my own worth. I'm not interested in being your fallback option when your first choice doesn't work out." "That's not what this is," she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "I realized I made a terrible mistake. I want to come home. I want us to work things out." "Where were you planning to live when you got out of jail tomorrow? Before this happened, where were you going to sleep?" I already knew the answer, but I wanted her to say it. Another long pause. "With Derek, but that was before I understood who he really was." "So you discovered his true character when he refused to help you, but you didn't discover mine when I supported you for 23 years. The observation felt like stating a mathematical fact. Interesting how that works. I hung up before she could respond. The phone rang again immediately, and I turned it off. Whatever Rachel was going through in that jail cell, whatever fear or regret or desperation she was experiencing, it was no longer my problem to solve. For the first time in our entire relationship, her emotions were not my responsibility. The next morning brought an unexpected sense of freedom. I'd slept better than I had in months, untroubled by guilt or second-guessing. My decision felt solid, defensible, and completely unlike anything the old Marcus would have done. I was becoming someone who valued himself enough to decline impossible demands from people who'd forfeited the right to make them. Work provided a welcome distraction from the phone calls I wasn't taking. I'd turned my cell back on, but sent Rachel's number directly to voicemail. According to the display, she'd called 16 times between midnight and 6 a.m. I deleted all the messages without listening to them. Dave noticed my mood during our morning project meeting.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
"You seem different today, more focused, like you've made some kind of decision." He was right, though he couldn't have known how literally.
Whatever it is, keep it up. That kind of clarity is exactly what we need for the Henderson Project. The Henderson Project was a luxury home renovation in Scottsdale, the kind of high-end work that required precise coordination and attention to detail. 3 months ago, I would have been intimidated by the responsibility. Today, I found myself looking forward to the challenge. Without Rachel's voice in my head questioning my competence, I was rediscovering confidence I had forgotten I possessed. Lunch brought a call from Linda, Rachel's sister. I almost sent it to voicemail with the others, but curiosity won. "Marcus, I heard about Rachel's situation. Are you going to help her?" "No," I said simply. "I'm not." Linda sounded shocked. "But she's family. Despite everything that happened between you two, she's still family." "She stopped being my family when she left me a note and disappeared. Family doesn't abandon each other for better options." The words felt harsh, but true. Rachel made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences. "This isn't like you, Marcus. You've always been the one who took care of everyone else." Linda was using the same appeal Rachel had tried, reminding me of my history of self-sacrifice as if it was an obligation rather than a choice. "Maybe that was the problem," I said. "Maybe taking care of everyone else prevented them from learning to take care of themselves." After ending Linda's call, I realized how much my perspective had shifted in just a few months. The man who'd received Rachel's goodbye note would have been devastated to hear her family criticizing him for not rescuing her. Today, their disapproval felt irrelevant. I was no longer performing the role of helpful Marcus for an audience that never appreciated the performance anyway. My afternoon was interrupted by a visit from Derek himself. Security called from the lobby of our office building to announce that someone named Derek Wilson was asking to see me. I had them send him up, curious to meet the man who'd been worth destroying my marriage over. Derek was everything Rachel's journal had described. Tall, well-dressed, confident in the way that comes from never having your adequacy questioned. He looked like someone who'd never worked overtime to pay someone else's bills, never sacrificed his own dreams to fund someone else's vision of happiness. He looked like the kind of man Rachel had always thought she deserved. "Marcus Thompson?" He extended his hand like we were meeting at a networking event. "I'm Derek Wilson. I think you know who I am." I shook his hand and gestured to the chair across from my desk. "I know exactly who you are. You're the reason my wife left me. You're also the reason she's sitting in jail right now." Derek had the grace to look uncomfortable. "That's actually why I'm here. I wanted to explain the situation and ask for your help." He settled into the chair and launched into what sounded like a rehearsed explanation. Rachel had been helping him with some client account transfers at his investment firm. Someone had made an error that resulted in money being moved incorrectly. During the investigation, Rachel's name had come up as the person who'd processed the transfers. "She didn't steal anything," Derek insisted. "It was a bookkeeping mistake that got blown out of proportion. But the company has to investigate every discrepancy, and the police got involved before we could sort it out internally." I listened to his story with the same attention I'd give to a contractor explaining why a project was running behind schedule. Professional interest without emotional investment. If it's just a misunderstanding, why haven't you bailed her out? Derek's composure slipped slightly. "My company has strict policies about employees becoming involved in legal situations even as witnesses. If I bail out someone who's been charged with theft from our clients, it could look like I'm trying to influence the investigation." "So you're protecting your job instead of protecting the woman you convinced to leave her husband." The accusation hung in the air between us like a physical object. "It's not that simple," Derek protested. "I have responsibilities, obligations to my firm, my career. I can't just ignore corporate policy because of personal relationships." The irony was stunning. Derek was abandoning Rachel for exactly the same reason I was. She had become inconvenient. The difference was that I had supported her for 23 years before reaching my limit, while he'd bailed out after 3 months of dating and 3 days of crisis. "Let me understand this correctly," I said, leaning back in my chair. "You pursued a married woman, convinced her to leave her husband, and now that she needs help, you're worried about appearances at your job." Derek nodded reluctantly. "And you came here to ask the husband she abandoned to clean up the mess you're not willing to handle." "She doesn't have anyone else," Derek said quietly. "Her family doesn't have that kind of money, and her friends don't know about the situation." "She had someone." She had a husband who would have moved heaven and earth to help her, but she traded him in for someone better. I stood up, indicating the meeting was over. Congratulations, Derek. You got exactly what you wanted. You also got exactly what comes with it. Derek left without another word. I watched him walk to the elevator, noting how his confidence had evaporated under the weight of actual responsibility. Rachel had been right about one thing. He was different from me. He was the kind of man who took what he wanted without considering the consequences for anyone else, including, apparently, himself. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of budget reviews and schedule adjustments. Normal work problems with practical solutions. No one was asking me to sacrifice my well-being for their comfort. No one was questioning my judgment or comparing me unfavorably to other options. The simplicity was refreshing. I drove home through Phoenix traffic, past restaurants where Rachel and I used to eat, past shopping centers where we'd spend weekend afternoons, past the life we had built together before she decided it wasn't enough. 3 months ago, these familiar sights had been painful reminders of loss. Tonight, they felt like evidence of escape. Frank was watering his front yard when I pulled into my driveway. He waved and walked over as I got out of my car. Heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Rachel's in some kind of trouble. Frank had become my unofficial source of local news, gathering information from Martha's extensive network of retired neighbors. She got arrested for theft, asked me to bail her out. I unlocked my front door and invited Frank inside for a beer. I told her no. Frank whistled low and shook his head. That must have been a hard decision. We settled into my living room with cold bottles of Corona. The space looked completely different now that I'd rearranged the furniture to suit my preferences instead of Rachel's design vision. Actually, it was the easiest decision I've made in years. She left me for someone who promised her a better life. Now she gets to find out what that life actually costs. Frank studied me with the expression of someone who'd learned to read people over 40 years of marriage. You know, Martha and I were worried about you for a while there. Right after Rachel left, you looked like a man who'd lost his way completely. He took a long drink of beer before continuing. But you look different now, stronger. Like you figured something out. He was right. I had figured something out. I'd learned that my worth wasn't determined by Rachel's satisfaction with our life together. I'd discovered that her happiness wasn't my responsibility, especially after she'd made it clear that my efforts were inadequate. Most importantly, I'd realized that being alone was infinitely better than being with someone who made you feel worthless. Frank, can I ask you something? He nodded encouragingly. In 42 years of marriage, has Martha ever made you feel like you weren't enough? Like you needed to be fundamentally different to deserve her love? Frank considered the question seriously. Every marriage has rough patches, times when people get frustrated with each other, but the foundation has always been that we chose each other, that we're on the same team. He looked around my living room, taking in the changes I'd made. If Martha spent our whole marriage suggesting I needed to be someone else to make her happy, I don't think we'd have lasted 42 years. That evening, I sat on my back patio with a glass of wine, watching the sunset over the desert mountains. My phone had stopped ringing. Either Rachel had found another solution to her problems, or she'd accepted that I wasn't going to provide one. Both possibilities felt like victory. The pool filter hummed quietly in the background, maintaining the crystal-clear water I'd learned to manage myself. 3 months ago, pool maintenance had been another item on the endless list of household responsibilities I'd handled while Rachel focused on more important things. Now it was a peaceful ritual. A few minutes each evening spent caring for something that was entirely mine. My neighbor, Sandra, appeared at the fence between our yards, carrying a glass of wine and looking like she wanted company. I'd seen her at Frank's barbecue, but hadn't talked to her much since. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. "I couldn't help noticing you've had some drama today." I invited her to sit in one of the patio chairs I'd bought to replace the expensive outdoor furniture Rachel had insisted we needed. Sandra was probably 50, divorced for 2 years according to Martha's intelligence network, and had the relaxed demeanor of someone who'd found peace after chaos. "Heard your ex-wife got arrested and asked you for bail money?" she said without preamble. "Also heard you told her no." Sandra had a direct communication style that I was learning to appreciate. No games, no manipulation, no hidden agendas. "News travels fast in this neighborhood." Sandra laughed. "Honey, in a community of retirees and divorced people, drama is the primary form of entertainment." She sipped her wine and looked out at the desert landscape. "For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice." "Do you?" I was genuinely curious about her perspective. Sandra had been through her own divorce, had faced her own decisions about responsibility versus self-preservation. "When I left my husband, I spent months expecting him to rescue me from the consequences of my choice. I wanted him to be supportive while I figured out my new life, understanding while I decided whether I'd made a mistake, patient while I got my finances sorted out." Sandra's voice carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. It took me a long time to realize that leaving meant actually leaving, that I couldn't have his support and his absence at the same time. Her words crystallized something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. Rachel wanted to leave our marriage without losing access to my resources. She wanted the excitement of a new relationship without the responsibility of supporting herself through the transition. She wanted to trade me in for a better model while keeping me available as backup support. "The hardest part about divorce," Sandra continued, "is learning that you can't control how other people respond to your choices. You can only control what you choose to do next." She finished her wine and stood to leave. "Sounds like you're figuring that out." That night, I called Kevin to update him on Derek's visit and my conversation with Sandra. He listened to the whole story without comment, then laughed so hard I was worried he might be having some kind of breakdown. "I'm sorry," he said when he finally caught his breath. "It's just so perfect. Rachel leaves you for a guy who turns out to be exactly as selfish as she is, then expects you to bail her out when her upgrade doesn't work." Kevin's amusement was infectious. You couldn't write fiction this poetic. "The weird thing is, I don't feel angry anymore. 3 months ago, I was devastated. Last month, I was furious. Tonight, I just feel free." "That's because you're not taking responsibility for her problems anymore. For the first time in your adult life, Rachel's emotions aren't your job to manage." After hanging up, I realized Kevin was right. For 23 years, Rachel's moods had been my weather system. When she was unhappy, I was responsible for fixing it. When she was disappointed, I was responsible for improving things. When she was bored, I was responsible for making life more interesting. Her emotional state had been my constant concern, my ongoing project, my measure of success as a husband. Now, she was sitting in jail, probably crying, definitely scared, completely miserable. And for the first time since I'd known her, her misery wasn't my problem to solve. The relief was overwhelming. I slept deeply that night, undisturbed by guilt or second-guessing. When I woke up the next morning, my first thought wasn't about Rachel's situation, or Derek's cowardice, or my family's disapproval. My first thought was about the Henderson project, the tile work we were starting today, the satisfaction of building something beautiful and permanent. The local news was playing on the television in our office break room when I arrived at work. Usually I ignored it in favor of coffee and project reviews. But today, a familiar name caught my attention. Derek Wilson was being interviewed about irregularities in client accounts at his investment firm. Derek looked polished and professional in his expensive suit, expressing confidence that the investigation would clear up all misunderstandings. He mentioned that several employees were being questioned as part of standard procedure, that the firm was cooperating fully with authorities, that client funds were secure and accounted for. He didn't mention Rachel by name, but the news anchor noted that one employee had been arrested in connection with the investigation. Derek's response was carefully neutral, emphasizing that personnel matters were confidential and that everyone was presumed innocent until proven otherwise. Watching Derek distance himself from Rachel's situation on television crystallized the decision I'd made. This was the man she'd thought was better than me. Someone who would throw her under the bus on live television to protect his own reputation. Someone who'd convinced her to abandon a marriage without accepting any responsibility for the consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Marcus, this is Rachel. They let me use someone's phone. Derek won't take my calls anymore. I'm still in jail. Please help me. I'll do anything." I deleted the message without responding. Whatever anything meant, it was too late. Rachel had already done everything when she left me that note 3 months ago. She'd made her choice based on what she thought would make her happier. Now, she got to discover whether she'd chosen correctly.
This is bigger than our personal problems. This is about Rachel learning that actions have consequences, that leaving your support system for someone better means actually giving up that support. "She made a mistake," Linda protested. "People make mistakes. That doesn't mean they deserve to suffer like this." "I made mistakes too," I replied. "I worked overtime to pay for things she wanted. I sacrificed my own interests to fund her vision of our life together. I spent 23 years trying to be worthy of someone who was always looking for someone better." My voice remained steady, factual. My mistake was thinking that level of devotion meant something to her. Linda was quiet for a moment. "She knows she was wrong to leave you the way she did. She's admitted that to everyone in the family." "Linda, knowing you were wrong and being sorry you got caught are two different things. Rachel isn't sorry she left me. She's sorry Derek turned out to be exactly what he appeared to be, a selfish man who takes what he wants without accepting responsibility for the consequences." I ended the call and turned my phone off for the rest of the day. Whatever pressure Rachel's family was planning to apply, whatever guilt trips they were preparing, I wasn't interested in hearing them. They'd had 23 years to appreciate my dedication to Rachel. They'd chosen to take it for granted, just like she had. The afternoon brought a surprise visit from Tom, the neighbor who'd shared his divorce experience at Frank's barbecue. He knocked on my office door around 4 o'clock, looking slightly uncomfortable but determined.
Marcus, I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I wanted to talk to you about something. He settled into the chair across from my desk with the careful movements of someone choosing his words carefully. I heard about your situation with Rachel, and I wanted to share something that might help. Tom had been divorced for 5 years, remarried for 2, and radiated the calm confidence of someone who'd successfully navigated major life changes. When my ex-wife left me, she spent months calling whenever she had problems. Car trouble, money issues, problems with her new boyfriend. She wanted me to keep solving her problems while she figured out her new life. I nodded, recognizing the pattern. How did you handle it? Badly, at first. I kept helping because I thought it proved I was a good person, that the divorce wasn't my fault, that I was somehow morally superior to the guy she'd left me for. Tom smiled ruefully. It took me almost a year to realize that rescuing her was preventing both of us from moving on. What changed your mind? I met Sarah, my current wife. She pointed out that I was still married to my ex-wife emotionally, still taking responsibility for her well-being, still defining myself by how helpful I could be to someone who'd rejected me. Tom leaned forward slightly. She told me that real love sometimes means letting people face the consequences of their choices. His words resonated with something I'd been feeling but couldn't name. Helping Rachel now wouldn't be an act of love. It would be an act of enabling, preventing her from learning that leaving meant actually leaving, that trading relationships meant giving up the benefits of the relationship you'd abandoned. The day I stopped taking my ex-wife's calls was the day I started building a real relationship with Sarah, Tom continued. You can't move forward while you're still cleaning up messes from your past. I thanked Tom for his perspective and spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about his words. For 3 months, I'd been rebuilding my life, rediscovering my interests, learning to value myself independently. But part of me had been waiting for this exact situation. Rachel in crisis, needing my help, giving me an opportunity to prove my worth through self-sacrifice. Saying no to her wasn't just about refusing to enable her choices. It was about refusing to fall back into the pattern that had defined our entire marriage. I was no longer the man whose value was measured by his willingness to solve other people's problems. I was becoming someone whose worth was inherent, independent of anyone else's assessment. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at a restaurant Rachel had always claimed was too expensive. The food was excellent, the service was attentive, and the bill was completely affordable on my single income. I'd been denying myself small luxuries for years to save money for Rachel's priorities. Now I could enjoy them without justification or guilt. Walking to my car after dinner, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: complete freedom from other people's expectations. No one was waiting at home to question my choices, criticize my spending, or suggest better alternatives. I could go anywhere, do anything, become anyone I chose to be. My phone had accumulated 17 missed calls by the time I turned it back on, all from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably Rachel calling from various jail phones or having other people call on her behalf. I deleted all the voicemails without listening to them and blocked the numbers. 3 days in jail, and Rachel was getting desperate. Derek had completely abandoned her. Her family didn't have money for bail. Her friends didn't know about the situation. I was her last option, her emergency contact, her backup plan for catastrophe. The position I'd held throughout our marriage was now entirely theoretical. She could count on me for anything except being counted on. Saturday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was having coffee on my back patio when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see a woman I didn't recognize, middle-aged, professionally dressed, carrying a briefcase. She looked like a lawyer or an insurance investigator. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Jennifer Martinez, Rachel's attorney. Could I speak with you for a few minutes?" I invited her to the patio and offered coffee, curious about what new angle this represented. Jennifer was probably 45, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to solving other people's problems through negotiation and persuasion. "Rachel asked me to speak with you about her bail situation. She's explained your relationship and the circumstances of your separation." "Has she explained why she thinks I should pay $1,500 to bail out the woman who left me for someone better?" I kept my tone conversational, genuinely interested in hearing the legal perspective on emotional blackmail. Jennifer smiled slightly. "She's explained that you're a fundamentally decent person who's always helped people in crisis, regardless of personal feelings." The lawyer was appealing to my identity rather than my emotions.
She's also explained that she made serious mistakes in how she handled your marriage. Jennifer, let me ask you something. If a client hired you to represent them, then fired you halfway through a case to hire someone they thought was better, would you expect them to call you for help when the new lawyer abandoned them? Jennifer paused, clearly not having expected the analogy. That's, not quite the same situation. It's exactly the same situation. Rachel fired me as her husband because she found someone she thought was better at the job. Now that her replacement has quit, she wants to rehire me temporarily to handle the crisis. I sipped my coffee and watched Jennifer process the comparison. Why would I take that job? Because she's learned from her mistakes, because she realizes now that she had something valuable with you. Jennifer was good at her job, pivoting smoothly from one argument to another. Because sometimes people need second chances to appreciate what they had. Jennifer, Rachel had 23 years to chances to appreciate what she had. She chose to see those years as evidence of my inadequacy rather than my devotion. I stood up, indicating the conversation was ending. Tell her I said good luck with her new life. After Jennifer left, I realized I'd reached a new level of clarity about my situation. Even Rachel's attorney couldn't construct a compelling argument for why I should rescue the woman who abandoned me. The case was too clear, the betrayal too obvious, the hypocrisy too blatant. I spent the rest of Saturday working in my yard, planting desert landscaping that required minimal water and maintenance. Physical labor in the Arizona sun, sweat dripping onto soil that was finally mine alone. No one to question my plant choices, criticize my spacing, or suggest improvements to my design. Just me, making my space beautiful according to my own vision. Sunday brought a call from Kevin, checking on my weekend and my state of mind. How are you holding up? I know this whole thing with Rachel has to be weighing on you.
Actually, it's not, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. 3 months ago, this would have destroyed me. Today, it feels like someone else's problem. That's growth, brother. Real growth. Kevin's pride in my development was genuine and encouraging. You've learned to separate Rachel's problems from your responsibilities. I think I've learned something even more important, I said, watching the sunset paint my desert landscape in shades of gold and purple. I've learned that my worth isn't determined by other people's assessment of it. Sunday evening brought one final call from a number I recognized. Linda, Rachel's sister, making one last attempt to change my mind. Marcus, Rachel's lawyer says the district attorney might offer a plea bargain tomorrow. If she takes it, she'll have a felony conviction on her record for the rest of her life. That sounds like something Rachel and her lawyer need to figure out together, I said calmly. This could ruin her life, Marcus. Is your pride really worth destroying someone's future? Linda was appealing to my conscience now, suggesting that refusing to help made me responsible for whatever happened to Rachel. Linda, Rachel's future was destroyed the moment she decided to leave me for Derek. Everything that's happened since then has been the natural consequence of that choice. My voice remained steady, factual. She chose to associate with someone who was willing to compromise client accounts. She chose to trust someone who abandoned her the moment she became inconvenient. She chose to burn her bridges with the one person who'd always been willing to help her. So you're going to let her go to prison because she hurt your feelings. I'm going to let her face the consequences of her choices, because that's what adults do, Linda. They live with the results of their decisions. I ended the call and turned off my phone for the night. Monday would bring whatever it brought. Rachel would make whatever deal her lawyer could negotiate. Derek would continue protecting his reputation at her expense. And I would continue building a life based on my own choices rather than other people's emergencies. Monday morning arrived with the crisp clarity that Arizona delivers before the summer heat settles in. I checked the local news online while drinking my coffee, curious whether Rachel's situation had attracted media attention. It had. A small article in the business section mentioned the investigation at Derek's investment firm, noting that one employee had been arrested and others were being questioned. Derek was quoted extensively, emphasizing the company's commitment to client protection and their cooperation with authorities. Rachel wasn't mentioned by name, but the article noted that criminal charges were pending against the arrested employee. She'd become a footnote in Derek's story, collateral damage in his attempt to protect himself. I arrived at work to find Dave waiting in my office with an expression I couldn't read. Marcus, we need to talk. There's been a development with the Henderson project that requires your immediate attention. Mrs. Henderson was on the phone when I arrived at the job site, pacing around her half-renovated kitchen with obvious agitation. She ended her call when she saw me and turned with relief evident on her face. Marcus, thank goodness you're here. I've been dealing with some very strange calls this morning. What kind of calls? A woman claiming to be your wife, asking me to contact you about some kind of emergency. She said you weren't taking her calls and that it was a matter of life and death. Mrs. Henderson looked confused and slightly annoyed. She seemed to know details about the project, about our timeline, about your work, but she was very emotional, almost hysterical. Rachel had somehow discovered where I was working and was now trying to reach me through my clients. The violation felt complete, her desperation overwhelming any respect for professional boundaries. She was willing to jeopardize my business relationships to force me into helping her. Mrs. Henderson, I apologize for this intrusion. The woman who called is my estranged wife. We're going through a difficult separation, and she's apparently trying to pressure me into helping her with a legal problem. I kept my explanation professional, but honest. If she contacts you again, please don't feel obligated to pass along any messages. Mrs. Henderson's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. I see. Well, that explains the desperate tone. She paused, studying my face carefully. Marcus, in the 3 months you've been working on my project, you've been nothing but professional, reliable, and honest. Whatever problems your wife is having, they clearly don't reflect your character. Her support felt unexpectedly meaningful. Mrs. Henderson had seen my work ethic, my attention to detail, my commitment to quality. Her assessment of my character was based on actual observation rather than emotional manipulation. The contrast with Rachel's constant criticism couldn't have been clearer. The rest of the morning passed in productive work, coordinating with subcontractors and reviewing progress on various project phases. Normal problems with practical solutions. No one was questioning my competence, demanding sacrifices for their comfort, or threatening to find someone better if I didn't meet their expectations. Around noon, Dave knocked on the trailer we were using as a temporary office. Marcus, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. I looked through the window to see Derek standing beside his BMW, looking significantly less polished than during our previous meeting. Derek approached with obvious reluctance, his confidence replaced by something approaching desperation. Marcus, I need to talk to you about Rachel's situation. Things have gotten complicated. More complicated than your girlfriend being arrested for theft while you abandon her to protect your job? I kept my tone conversational, genuinely curious about what could make Derek's situation worse. The district attorney is offering Rachel a plea bargain. She can plead guilty to a misdemeanor with probation, or she can fight the charges and risk a felony conviction if she loses at trial. Derek was speaking quickly, like someone delivering bad news he didn't want to dwell on. Her lawyer says the plea is the smart choice, but Rachel needs to make bail to properly prepare her defense. And you're telling me this because... Derek looked genuinely uncomfortable. Because if she takes the plea, she'll have a criminal record. If she fights it and loses, she could go to prison. Either way, her life is going to be severely impacted by something that was really just a bookkeeping error. I studied Derek's face, noting the careful way he'd phrased Rachel's situation as a bookkeeping error rather than acknowledging any responsibility for the circumstances that led to her arrest. Derek, let me ask you something. Do you love Rachel? The question caught him off guard. Of course I do. That's why I'm here. If you love her, then why haven't you paid her bail yourself? I told you, my company has policies about employees becoming involved in legal situations. If I bail out someone who's been charged with theft from our clients, it could compromise the investigation and my position. His rehearsed explanation sounded even weaker the second time. So, your love for Rachel is conditional on it not affecting your career prospects. I wasn't asking a question, just stating an observation. You're willing to pursue her while she's married, convince her to leave her husband, but not willing to help her when she needs you most.
Derek's composure finally cracked. Look, I know how this looks, but I worked for 15 years to build my career. I can't throw it away for someone I've been dating for 3 months. There it was, the brutal honesty Rachel had refused to see. Derek valued his career more than their relationship. He'd been willing to help destroy my marriage for his entertainment, but not willing to risk his job for her freedom. She'd traded a husband who would have sacrificed anything for her for a man who wouldn't sacrifice anything for her. Derek, you came to the right conclusion for the wrong reasons. Rachel isn't your responsibility, but she wasn't your right to take either.
Derek left looking even more defeated than when he'd arrived. I watched his BMW disappear down the street, carrying away the man who'd convinced Rachel that she deserved better than me. He'd been right about one thing. Rachel did deserve better. She deserved better than both of us, though for very different reasons. The afternoon brought a surprise phone call from Mrs. Henderson. "Marcus, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I wanted you to know that your wife contacted me again. This time she was even more desperate, offering to pay me money if I could convince you to help her." The revelation that Rachel was trying to bribe my clients to intervene on her behalf crossed every reasonable boundary. She was willing to compromise my professional relationships, waste other people's time, and spend money she didn't have to force me into rescuing her. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm deeply sorry that she's involving you in this situation. It's completely inappropriate and unprofessional." I meant every word. Rachel's desperation was now affecting innocent people who'd done nothing except hire me for honest work. "Actually, Marcus, her calls have convinced me of something important," Mrs. Henderson said thoughtfully. "She spent 20 minutes telling me about your marriage, your character, and your obligations to help her. What struck me was how much she focused on what you owed her rather than what she'd contributed to your relationship." Mrs. Henderson's observation was perceptive and painful. Even while begging for help, Rachel couldn't acknowledge the 23 years of support I'd provided. She could only focus on what I wasn't doing for her now. "In my experience," Mrs. Henderson continued, "people who constantly talk about what others owe them rarely appreciate what they've already received." Her words stayed with me for the rest of the afternoon. Rachel's entire appeal was based on the assumption that my past devotion created an ongoing obligation to rescue her from the consequences of leaving me. She couldn't conceive of a world where her actions might actually cost her something permanent. That evening, I sat on my back patio reviewing the financial statements I'd avoided examining for months. Without Rachel's expenses, my budget had completely transformed. No more shopping trips to justify, no more restaurant meals I couldn't afford, no more gifts purchased to compensate for imaginary shortcomings. My mortgage payment was manageable, my utilities were reasonable, and my discretionary income was substantial. For the first time in my adult life, I had money left over at the end of each month. Money I could save, invest, or spend on things I actually wanted. The financial freedom was almost as intoxicating as the emotional liberation. My phone rang around 8 o'clock, Linda again, making what I suspected would be her final attempt to change my mind. "Marcus, Rachel's lawyer says they need an answer about the bail by tomorrow morning. The plea hearing is scheduled for Wednesday." "Linda, the answer is still no. It will be no tomorrow morning, no on Wednesday, and no for the foreseeable future." My patience with Rachel's family had finally expired. "Stop calling me about this." "She's going to have a criminal record for the rest of her life because you're too proud to help," Linda said, her voice tight with anger. "She's going to have a criminal record because she chose to get involved with someone who was willing to compromise client accounts and then abandon her when she needed help." My response was calm, factual, devoid of emotion. "I didn't create this situation, Linda. I just refused to fix it." Tuesday morning brought news that I'd been expecting. The local newspaper's business section carried an update on the investment firm investigation. Rachel had accepted a plea bargain, pleading guilty to a misdemeanor charge of improper handling of client funds in exchange for probation and restitution. She'd been released from jail pending sentencing. Derek was quoted in the article expressing relief that the investigation had been resolved quickly and emphasizing his company's commitment to proper procedures. No mention of his personal relationship with the defendant, no acknowledgement of any responsibility for the situation. Rachel had been processed through the legal system like a clerical error, disposed of efficiently to protect more important interests. I felt nothing reading the article. No satisfaction, no regret,
No vindication. Rachel's legal troubles were over, resolved without my involvement or financial contribution. She'd faced the consequences of her choices without my intervention, which is exactly what should have happened. Work provided its usual refuge from emotional complexity. The Henderson project was nearing completion, the transformation of their kitchen exceeding even my expectations. Quality work, satisfied clients, problems solved through skill and dedication rather than sacrifice and self-denial. My team had developed an efficient rhythm, each person contributing their expertise without drama or manipulation. Mrs. Henderson stopped by around noon to review the final details and express her satisfaction with the results. "Marcus, this kitchen is exactly what I envisioned, but executed better than I thought possible." She looked around the space with obvious pleasure. "You've taken my ideas and made them reality." Her appreciation felt genuine and earned. I delivered quality work on schedule and within budget, solving problems through competence rather than accommodation. The contrast with my marriage couldn't have been more stark. Mrs. Henderson valued my contribution because she could see the results. Rachel had criticized my efforts because they never matched her fantasies. Wednesday brought an unexpected call from Jennifer, Rachel's attorney. "Mr. Thompson, I wanted to update you on Rachel's situation. She accepted the plea agreement yesterday and will be sentenced next month to probation and community service." "Thank you for the update," I said, genuinely grateful for the closure. "I hope she learns from this experience." "She asked me to tell you that she understands now why you refused to help her. She realizes that leaving meant actually leaving, that she couldn't expect your support after rejecting your marriage." Jennifer's tone was professional but thoughtful. She also wanted me to tell you that she's sorry for the way she ended things between you. Rachel's apology delivered through her lawyer felt as impersonal as her original goodbye note. Even her remorse was mediated through a third party, avoiding direct accountability for the pain she had caused. But the acknowledgement that she understood my position felt significant. Maybe she was finally learning that actions have consequences. "Jennifer, I appreciate Rachel's apology, but I'm not interested in renewed contact with her. We've both moved on to different lives, and that's probably best for everyone involved." "I understand completely. For what it's worth, I think you made the right decision about the bail. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them face the results of their choices." That evening, I cooked an elaborate dinner for myself, something I'd never done during my marriage. Salmon with herbs from my garden, roasted vegetables, a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. The meal was delicious, the wine was perfect, and the solitude was peaceful rather than lonely. Frank and Martha knocked on my door while I was cleaning up, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing expressions of celebration. "We heard about Rachel's plea agreement. Thought you might want some company tonight." We sat on my back patio sharing champagne and conversation about everything except Rachel. Frank told stories about his early career in construction, Martha shared updates about their daughter's new baby, and I found myself laughing more than I had in months. Simple human connection without agenda or manipulation. "Marcus, you look like a completely different person than you did 6 months ago. More relaxed, more confident, like you finally figured something out." She was right. I had figured something out. I'd learned that my worth wasn't determined by other people's satisfaction with my efforts to please them. I discovered that being alone was infinitely better than being with someone who made me feel inadequate. Most importantly, I'd realized that love wasn't about sacrificing everything for someone who wouldn't sacrifice anything for you.
Mrs. Henderson walked through her transformed kitchen with obvious delight, examining every detail and expressing amazement at the quality of the work. "Marcus, this is exactly what I wanted, but better than I imagined possible." She handed me a check for the final payment and a bonus I hadn't expected. "You've been professional, reliable, and honest throughout this entire project. In my experience, that combination is rare and valuable." Her words felt like a professional benediction, validation that my skills and character produced results that people valued. I'd spent months doubting my adequacy based on Rachel's constant criticism. Mrs. Henderson's satisfaction proved that my competence was real, measurable, and appreciated by people who judged based on results rather than fantasies. Saturday evening brought my dinner with Sandra, a simple meal at a neighborhood restaurant that specialized in Southwestern cuisine. She was engaging, intelligent, and refreshingly direct in her communication.
We talked about our divorces, our discoveries about independence, and our cautious optimism about the future. The hardest part about my divorce, Sandra said over dessert, was learning to trust my own judgment again. I'd spent so many years accommodating someone else's vision of how things should be that I'd forgotten what I actually wanted. Her words resonated deeply. I'd spent 23 years trying to become the husband Rachel wanted, rather than being the man I was. The effort had been exhausting and ultimately futile. She'd left me for someone different, proving that my attempts at transformation had been both inadequate and unnecessary. "What do you want now?" Sandra asked. The question was simple but profound. For the first time in decades, I was free to want things based on my own preferences rather than other people's expectations. "I want to build things that last," I said. "I want to work with people who appreciate quality. I want to wake up in the morning excited about the day ahead rather than worried about how to avoid disappointing someone." Sandra smiled. "Those sound like achievable goals for someone willing to work for them." We walked back to our neighborhood in comfortable silence, the desert air warm against our skin and the stars brilliant in the clear Arizona sky. At her door, Sandra thanked me for dinner and the conversation. "I'd like to do this again," she said simply. "So would I replied, meaning it completely. Sunday morning brought a sense of completion I hadn't experienced in months. The Henderson project was finished, Rachel's legal troubles were resolved, and I was beginning to explore the possibility of new relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or rescue. I spent the morning working in my garden, planting vegetables and herbs that would provide fresh ingredients for the meals I was learning to cook for myself. Physical work in soil that belonged entirely to me, growing food that would nourish only me, planning harvests that would feed my own interests. My phone rang while I was watering the new plants. Kevin calling with his weekly check-in and updates from Tucson. "How are things going, brother? You sound different lately, more settled." "Things are good," I said, surprising myself with how true that statement felt. "Better than good, actually. I'm starting to understand what happiness feels like when it's not dependent on someone else's mood." Kevin laughed. "That's the best kind of happiness, the kind you create for yourself instead of trying to earn from other people." We talked for another hour about my work, my developing friendship with Sandra, and my plans for the summer. Simple conversation between brothers who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. No crisis to manage, no problems to solve, no drama to navigate. Monday brought a new project proposal, a commercial renovation that would challenge my skills and provide steady income for the next 6 months. The client was impressed by Mrs. Henderson's recommendation and my portfolio of completed work. Professional success based on competence rather than accommodation. Tuesday brought a text message from an unknown number that I almost deleted without reading. "Marcus, this is Rachel. I wanted you to know that I'm moving back to California to stay with my cousin while I complete my probation. I won't be bothering you anymore. Thank you for teaching me that actions have consequences. I hope you find happiness." I read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. Rachel was finally accepting responsibility for her choices and their outcomes. She was moving away to rebuild her life without expecting my support or involvement. The closure felt complete and appropriate. Wednesday brought dinner with Sandra at my house, a simple meal I'd prepared myself and served on my back patio. We talked about books, travel, and our plans for the future. Easy conversation between two people who'd learned to value independence but weren't afraid of companionship. "I like what you've done with this place," Sandra said, looking around the patio and garden that reflected my preferences rather than Rachel's design vision. "It feels peaceful, authentic, like someone lives here who actually enjoys their life." Her observation captured something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. My house had become a home rather than a showcase, a place where I lived according to my own rhythms rather than someone else's expectations. The transformation was visible in every room, every choice, every detail that reflected my actual preferences. A month later, I was sitting in that same spot reading the local newspaper when a small item caught my attention. Derek Wilson had been terminated from his position at the investment firm following the completion of their internal investigation. Apparently, the irregularities in client accounts had been more extensive than initially reported, and Derek had been quietly dismissed to avoid further scandal. The man Rachel had thought was better than me had lost the job he'd protected at her expense. His sacrifice of their relationship for his career had been pointless. His abandonment of her unnecessary. He'd chosen professional security over personal loyalty and ended up with neither. I felt no satisfaction reading about Derek's downfall. His failure didn't validate my worth any more than his initial success had proven my inadequacy. My value wasn't determined by comparison to other people's outcomes. I was learning to measure my worth by my own standards rather than external benchmarks. Sandra and I had been seeing each other regularly for 2 months, building a relationship based on mutual appreciation rather than need or rescue. She valued my stability without taking it for granted. I enjoyed her independence without feeling threatened by it. We were two complete people choosing to share experiences rather than incomplete people trying to fix each other. "You know what I like most about this relationship?" Sandra asked one evening as we walked through the neighborhood after dinner. "We're both here because we want to be, not because we need to be." Her words captured the essential difference between what I was building with her and what I had with Rachel. Rachel needed me to solve her problems, fund her lifestyle, and validate her worth. Sandra appreciated my company, but didn't require my sacrifice. The relationship was voluntary rather than transactional. 6 months after Rachel's goodbye note, I was living a life I'd never imagined possible. Financial independence, professional satisfaction, personal relationships based on choice rather than obligation or rescue. I'd discovered that happiness wasn't something you earned through self-sacrifice or achieved by meeting other people's expectations. It was something you created by making choices that aligned with your values and interests. The man who had been devastated by a sticky note on his refrigerator had disappeared completely. In his place was someone who understood his own worth, valued his own time, and built relationships with people who appreciated his contributions rather than constantly demanding more. Some evenings, I sat on my back patio remembering the morning I'd found Rachel's note. The pain was overwhelming, the rejection complete, and the future unimaginable. I thought my life was ending when it was actually beginning. Rachel's abandonment had been the catalyst for discoveries I never would have made while trying to be worthy of someone who would never be satisfied. The desert sunset painted my garden in shades of gold and purple, illuminating vegetables I'd planted, paths I'd designed, and spaces I'd created according to my own vision. Tomorrow would bring new projects, new challenges, and new opportunities to build something lasting. Tonight brought peace, satisfaction, and the deep contentment of a man who had finally learned to value himself appropriately. My phone sat silent on the patio table beside me, no longer an instrument of crisis or manipulation. The people in my life now called to share good news, plan enjoyable activities, or simply check on my well-being. No one demanded rescue, sacrifice, or proof of devotion. The silence was golden. The peace was earned. And the future was entirely my own to create. 6 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days after Rachel left me a note saying she'd found someone better, I'd found something better too. I'd found myself.